everyone. It is Saturday, February 1st, and since it's February 1st and since it's a new year, I figured I would do a little bit of a wrap-up video for you guys. So I have been meaning to do a 2019 wrap-up for a few weeks now, and I just haven't gotten around to it. So I figure I would throw that in the beginning of this video, because I also figured I would start doing monthly wrap-up videos, just quick little clips to talk about what I've accomplished through the month and what I hope to accomplish in the upcoming month. So we'll start with the 2019 wrap-up. So in 2019, I knit 26 pairs of socks, 26 pairs of socks, 8 shawls, 4 hats, 2 cows, 1 scarf, 40 dishcloths, 1 poncho, 1 blanket, 4 sweaters, and I also spun at least 26 skeins of yarn. I lost count after 26, so I don't know, there might be some that I forgot to write down that I did, and kind of like that in between October and December. So like anything I spun in October and December, I don't think is accounted for in that. And then I also finished 3 diamond paintings. So yeah, I'm really happy with my progress in 2019. I had a knitting queue of like projects that I wanted to cast on and finish in 2019, in addition to the whips that I wanted to finish. And I only ended up finishing, I think, 13 things off of that knitting queue, and there were 26 items on there. So, and a lot of the things that I didn't finish are sweaters, and I'm really disappointed in how many sweaters that I did last year. But you know, last year was a big year of growth for my business, and I spent a lot of time putting so much work and effort into it. So this year, with me taking a step back in that respect, I think that I will have more knitting time, and I'll be able to meet more of my knitting goals for 2020. So originally, when I first started thinking about like what I wanted to do for 2020, I was thinking that along the lines of like knitting a sweater every month and sticking to my knitting schedule, etc. But since then, I have kind of reprioritized what I want to do in 2020. So I have been working on my whip jar for over a year now. It's been almost 2 years. And to me, it's really important that I finish out that whip jar this year. I have projects in there that I have cast on like 5 years ago that are either almost finished or super simple, quick 1 skein projects. And I would love to get those done. In 2019, most of the more challenging projects I had pulled out of the whip jar. So I had a beaded lace shawl in there that was absolutely like horrifying to knit, only because it took so much time and patience. And I had, there was something else that was like a really big undertaking. It was very complicated that I knit. My poncho was in there. I finished that. There were quite a few wins out of that whip jar this year that I got off the needles that have been on the needles forever. But I finished the year with 22 whips, which is exactly what I started the year with. So this year, I would like to end the year with fewer whips than last year. And I have a couple ways, a couple plans of how I'm going to do that. So I started off January trying to finish up all my Advent yarn. So anything that was left over downstairs next to my knitting chair at the end of December, I spent January trying to finish up. So a lot of that was full skeins from like Advent calendars and from this year and last year. So full skeins from Advent calendars from this year and last year. And so I was able to knit a ton of pair of socks, which was very challenging, but I was able to do it. And we're kind of leading into what I finished in January. So I was able to finish, for the socks, I finished 2 pairs of shorty socks for Jason. And I finished another, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pairs of socks for myself. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 pairs of socks for myself. So I knit a total of 7 pairs of socks, 4 of which were full length pattern socks. So that is pretty impressive if I do say so myself. January was a very long month, but I was finishing a pair of socks like every 2 to 3 days and managing my work schedule. So I was really happy with that. I'm actually wearing the pair of shorty socks that I made myself today. I love them. They're my mismatched socks that I showed on the last podcast. So also in January, I finished my 2019 spinning advent. Not spinning advent. That's not right. Oh yeah, I did. So also in 2019, the second day of January, I was able to finish up my last spinning advent that needed to be plied. So I had finished the other 2, I think, at the end of the year. So probably the last day of the month, I would assume, in December. So I was able to finish up that second one. I was able to finish up that third one. I was able to finish up that third one on the second day of January this year. So that was the only spinning I did in this month, and I'll talk more about my spinning plans and goals for 2020 in a few minutes. And then the other finished object that I had this week, the only other finished object I had this week besides the spinning and the socks, was my Jimmy Beans wool advent calendar, which I had only had. It's 24 clue project. I'm gonna say it's 24 clues because it wasn't split up into 24 days, but it was supposed to take you 24 days to finish. And when I started, I had only had days 1 through 3 done. So when I started it, picked it back up at the beginning of January, I had started there, and I was able to finish it by the 9th of January. So in the first week of January, the first 9 days of January, I finished 2 pairs of socks, I applied a spinning advent, and I finished my advent shawl. So I am super happy with that. I'm really happy with the progress. It essentially took me 4 days to finish my Jimmy Beans wool advent calendar, which I'm so happy with. So I'm really happy with the knitting progress I made in January. So as far as goals for February and for 2020, so what I've decided to do is continue to finish up my advent calendars. I have been working on, and one of the things that I didn't write on this finished objects list that I have been working on for about the last week is my Indie Dyer Advent shawl, or Indie Dyer Advent projects. And I had decided to do the ornaments from Christy of Yarn Cafe Creations for both 2019 and 2018, and with that advent calendar, because I had 24 20-gram skeins. And I am on day 6 as of last night. I'm halfway through day 6. I finished one of the 2 day 6 projects. So that's pretty good. So by the end of tomorrow, I am hoping to be on day 10, or as close to day 10 as I can be, because that will mean I did 10 days in a week, because I started last Sunday. And if I can do 10 days in a week, then I expect to have it done by the 2nd week of February. Regardless, I hope it's done by the 2nd week of February, but those little ornaments, knitting them back to back, is very tedious. So it is a challenge to kind of get them done, but I am going to love the finished objects, so I'm just going to keep pushing through. So when that's done, I plan to cast on my Gail's Art Advent Calendar, and I am making another Sew Faded sweater. So I love my Sew Faded sweater so much. I've knit 3 of them that I decided and I love my Scrappy Sew Faded sweater that I knit with the Honeybee Knits 2019 Advent Calendar so much that I decided there's nothing else I would rather do to make a memory of this advent calendar than to knit another sweater. Now next December, I do not want to put myself into a position where I am spending all year knitting advent calendars. They're very expensive, and so when I purchase them, I feel like I need to use them as quickly as possible so that they don't sit and become stash yarn. And so I put kind of this pressure on myself to finish them up. And I did it last year, but I also had other projects that I was working on in between, and it took me all the way to the end of the summer to finish up my advents. So this year I'm trying to push and get all of those knit in the beginning of the year so that they're off my mind. And then come December, I don't plan to buy any knitting advents this year. I might consider the Jimmy Beans wool one, and I of course will still do the socks and the spinning, but as far as the knitting one goes, I don't think that I'm going to be participating. Just because it's too much to keep up with, and it's too stressful and too expensive, quite frankly. So I would rather take that money and to put it into something more useful. Overall 2020 goals. So last year, if you followed me for a while, you know that I've done a knitting schedule where, so Mondays I would knit sweaters, Tuesdays I would spin, Wednesdays I would do like diamond painting or something along those lines. At Thursdays I would work on whips, Fridays were small project Fridays, Saturdays were sock Saturdays, and Sundays were scrappy Sunday. So I am no longer doing that this year because I'm trying to be monogamous. I would like to see projects finished quicker instead of just seeing little progress on multiple projects. I want to see a big chunk of progress on few projects. So once I finish in February, my Gales Art Advent probably won't be done until March. But once it is done, I plan to do, I think it's called the Gideon method. So Wool and Honey, if you follow them on Instagram, put up a blog post about, I believe it's called the Gideon method. I'm probably saying that wrong or misremembering it. But they basically put up a blog post that gives you a way to kind of get variety in your knitting while also making big chunks of progress. So what it does is it has you pick 5 whips and you order them. So whip 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. And then you spend 12 hours of knitting time on each whip. Now you don't have to do 12 hours. They suggest 12 hours so that you can see real progress. But if you don't have a lot of knitting time, so if you're only knitting a couple hours a week, like 3 or 4 hours a week, then that is not going to work for you. So it would be better if you just set like minute limits or like 1 or 2 hour limits. For me, I normally get about 3 to 4 hours of knitting a day throughout the week, and then on, not normally, I would say that more often than not I do, about 1 or 2 days a week, I only get about an hour or 2. But I do get a lot of knitting time throughout the week, and then I also have a big chunk of knitting time typically on either Saturday or Sunday, or sometimes both depending on our family obligations. So I have decided that I am going to try that method out. And I am going to do the 12-hour mark because I do want to see big chunks of progress, and I want to stay relatively monogamous. And I think there's very few projects that I have casted on right now that is going to take me more than 12 hours to finish. There will be some. So what I've decided to do is to keep my whips going down from the whip jar, but also keep the new projects that I want to knit this year casted on. I'm going to do the following. So I'm going to make one of my 5 projects a pair of socks that I already have casted on. I have about 7 pairs of socks that are already casted on that were started toe up, and I got to the heel, put the heel in, tried them on, and I don't like the fit. So I'm gonna rip all those out and do them top down. And I plan to make them full-size socks, pattern socks from the Knitting Expat sock collections, multiple sock collections, not one in particular. But I'm gonna start with Beyond Vanilla Part 2 because I just finished Beyond Vanilla Part 1 in January. So one of my whips is gonna be socks. The other whip will be a cast on, and I'm going to be starting with the Chunky Grandpa cardigan by Joji Locatelli in the Malabrigo Fuchsia colorway that I got for Christmas from Jason. I am going to a knitting event in July, and there are 2 sweaters out of that colorway that I'm making. One's a sweater, one's like a t-shirt, and I want to have those done before then. So the deal with the cast on is it has to be the last project in the queue. So it has to be project number 5, the last thing that I work on in the 12-hour blocks. And I can't add, and one of my other projects cannot be a new cast on until this cast on is done. So as I finish one thing, I will pull it out and put something like it in. So when I finish the sock, I'll put another sock in. When I finish the cast on, I'll put another cast on in. The other project will be my Cozy Memories blanket. I know it's going to take me longer than 12 hours to finish, but I am very close to finishing it compared to how long I've been working on it, and I want it done this year. So I'm going to be working on it in 12-hour blocks. I am no longer doing Scrap Day Sunday, so this will just be 12 hours of knitting time. And so this will probably be project number 2. So I know I'm telling you this, and I'll tell you the order that I plan to work them at the end of this. But so that's going to be one of my projects, and then once my Cozy Memories blanket is finished, then my stained glass blanket is going to take its place. And then once my stained glass blanket is finished, which won't be done this year, I know it's going to take me much longer to work on those 2 blankets than I have time this year. So next year I plan to cast on a new blanket, and I'll keep doing that as long as this method continues to work for me. The last 2 projects will both be projects, another thing that I want to finish is I have a lot of Knit Picks yarn that I'd like to work my way through. Now this could technically be considered a cast on, but it's small quick win projects with yarn that I have in stash. So dishcloths is a good example of that. So my first goal for the beginning of the year is to work through my dishy yarn. So that's going to be one of my things, one of my projects. So I will do that. And once I get through the dishy, I'm not sure what I'll do from them, because I know that I probably only have 12 to 24 hours of knitting time worth of dishy left. That's how I'm kind of calculating it. So once I get through the first 2 rounds of it and I finish up the dishy, I'm not sure what I'll do. I'm considering one of 2 things. Either I'll continue with the Knit Picks train and pull some more Knit Picks yarn out, because I have a lot of Felici I want to make socks out, so I might do a pair of socks. Or I have that Fable Fur I just got. I want to make a throw for my front room, so I might do that. But see, some of these things can be classified as multiple categories, so I'm trying to make sure they stay separate. So the Fable Fur blanket could be considered a new cast on, or it could be considered a blanket. The Knit Picks, and it can be considered Knit Pick stash decreasing. The socks can be Knit Pick stash decreasing, or the socks category. So I'm trying not to blur the lines, because I do want to keep 5 individual projects. So we'll see how I feel when I get to the end of the dishy. And then my 5th and final project will be the second thing I might do instead of doing the continuing the Knit Pick stash dive is to add a project from the Whip It Jar. So one of my projects will be dedicated to the Whip It Jar projects, and that will be the priority project. That will be number 1 at all times. So when I finish the dishy, I might consider doing 2 Whip It Thursday projects at a time. So the way I'm ordering them, I hold up my hand like this is visually helping you keep track, which it's not at all. But number 1 will be my Whip It Thursday jar project, which currently is my Speckle Pop shawl from Stephen West. I think I have less than 12 hours of work done. And also, when you finish a project, you pull in another project to replace it. I don't know if I made that clear or not. So my first one will be the Speckle Pop shawl by Stephen West. I mean, at this point, he might as well be called Knitting West, right? So the second project, project number 2, will be my blanket. Project number 3 will be my dishcloths. Project number 4 will be socks, and project number 5 will be my new cast on. And I will work those 12 hours at a time. So hopefully the goal would be to get through 1 12-hour block for each project each month. There will be some months where I don't get through them all, and there will be some months where I get through one more than once. So depending on my knitting time, but I plan to keep track, and I'm not going to be like super anal about it and set a timer and whatever. I'm kind of just gonna estimate based on, like, I'm gonna look at the clock when I start knitting that night and estimate based on the clock how many hours I spent by the time I finish. If it's 2 or 3 hours, I'll mark it down. The next day I'll do another 2 or 3 hours until I hit that 12-hour mark, and then I'll switch projects. So that sounds like something that you're interested in. I highly encourage you to come join me and spend some time with me doing that. I think it'll be a lot of fun. And that's my plans for the year. So my next thing I want to talk about, you may not be interested in, but I also kind of wanted to give a quick update on how my reading goals are going for the month. I know a lot of us knitters are also readers, whether it's audiobook, ebook, or paper book. So I figured I would just give a quick update about what I've been reading and what some of my favorite books were from the month. So this month I have finished 5 books. 4 of them were physical books, 1 of them was audiobooks. I finished Heartless by Marissa Meyer, which was the, I think, November Literary Society book. I am a part of the Hello Stella Literary Society. I say I'm a part, but I really just, she has a book club, and I don't really participate in the question and answers, but I do read the books that everybody's reading, and it's kind of fun that somebody else picks your reading material for you. And I had a hard time reading in December because it was a really busy month for me, and I was really focused on knitting and spinning. So when I picked it back up in January, I was able to finish that book pretty quickly. I think I finished it on the 2nd day of January. I also finished Lord of Shadows, which is a part of the Cassandra Clare saga. Those are all the audiobooks I listened to last year was hers. And I don't want to say that because I know there were a few at the beginning of the year that I listened to that weren't hers. And it's getting to, I'm almost caught up with the series. I can't believe she's still releasing books because I've been listening to these since I was like in high school. And I just did a reread this year of the ones that I have already listened to, and then started listening to the newer ones. I finished Lord of Shadows. I haven't started the next one yet, only because A, I don't have as much audio listening time as I used to because I'm not dyeing yarn anymore. And B, I am trying to get caught up with My Favorite Murder podcast. So I'm on like really far behind with that. And so I am currently in March of 2019. So I'm almost caught up, but I got a long way to go. So I'm going to finish catching up with those before I start listening to audiobooks for this month. So that paired with the fact that it's a shorter month means that I know I'm going to get less reading done this month than I did last month. I'm not going to have as many books then. The 3rd book I read was I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara about the Golden State Killer, which is absolutely fabulous if you're a true crime fan. If you listen to My Favorite Murder, you know this is pretty much, it's a really good book. I highly recommend it. And the fact that he's been caught now. I've had this book for a while since it released, and I hadn't read it yet because this is one of the only cases that has really given me nightmares, so to speak, because he hadn't been caught, and he did some pretty terrifying things to not only women but couples, and that's one of my that's a very scary thing, to be with somebody and be where you feel safe and then have something bad happen to you. So I wasn't able to read it, but they did catch him last year, so I finally got around to reading it. The next book I read was Stay Sexy, Don't Get Murdered, which is kind of like the dual biography, I think they call it, from the ladies who host the My Favorite Murder podcast. I got so much more out of it than I thought I would. I didn't really have any expectations going into it. And I realized if you listen to the podcast, you know that Karen and Georgia are the hosts, and I always thought I was a Karen. But after reading the book, I actually relate more to Georgia, which is hilarious because I always found Georgia a little bit annoying in the podcast. So it's funny that I relate to her most. So it also makes me realize how some other people might perceive me as being a little bit annoying. So anyway, I read that one. And then the last book I read, which was my favorite book of the month, it was the only 5-star read I had this month that I highly, highly recommend to anybody that's a huge Elton John fan or even just a little bit of a fan, is Me by Elton John. I am a huge Elton John fan, and I didn't want the book to end the way he told the stories of his life. It just, you wanted to know more. It was kind of like you were sitting down with him and he was actually talking to you and telling you about all these different life experiences that he has had, which are pretty incredible. But also he talks a lot about mental health and his addiction and all of that kind of stuff. So he felt, and even like problems with his mother and things like that, things that are very relatable. So it's very kind of odd to be able to relate to somebody like Elton John, but I totally do. And I love him so much for putting that out there. And if you ever have a chance to see him in concert, please do. He is on his farewell tour. There's not many concert dates left, and I know tickets are incredibly expensive, but it was worth, I say it was worth the money, but when Jason and I went, we basically paid for one ticket, or for 2 tickets, what they're charging for one now. So I'm very thankful that we got to go, and had I never seen him, I probably would pay the money to go to the new tour, the last tour, but since I've seen him before, I don't think I'm going to be doing that. But anyway, so this video was so much longer than it should have been, but I am glad that I got to chat with you guys today and give a little bit of an update. I'm sorry this was not like a typical podcast. It's not my podcasting week, but it's something I really wanted to talk to you guys about, and I knew by the time I was ready to podcast next weekend that all of this would have been out the window and I would have been fresh into February and ready to talk about February stuff. So anyway, I hope you guys had a wonderful week. I hope you guys have another great week. And I will see you guys in about another week. Have a great day. Bye.